Hello, welcome to a new radio show on Resound Radio, ReAct, with me, James Beecher. We're going to be doing a, hopefully at least weekly radio show looking at local politics and perhaps some national political issues as well, at least once a week up until the election on June the 8th, the general election. We're going to theme the shows, and today's theme is Remember. And the reason for that is that we're coming up to the May Day bank holiday, and there's been an event in Stroud today ahead of that. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things around May Day with our guest, Hannah Basson. So before we talk to Hannah, I'm just going to say a little bit about why the May Day bank holiday exists. So the May Day bank holiday was originally started as a result of some strikes which took place in Chicago in the 1880s. And the American Federation of Labour adopted a resolution that 8 hours shall constitute a day's labour from after May the 1st, 1886. They wanted to limit the working day to 8 hours, and to pursue this goal, they undertook strikes. And the largest of these were in Chicago, where on May the 1st, 1886, 400,000 people took part in the strike. Now, as a result of a lot of the political campaigning that was happening then and the demonstrations that happened on the strike day, 5 people were arrested and killed, and they're known as the Haymarket Martyrs because the demonstrations were held in Haymarket Square. 4 people were executed, 1 killed himself in prison to cheat the hangman. But as a result, a few years later, May Day was formally recognised at the 1891 session of the International Labour Movement. And since then, it's become a holiday in various countries.
So it's a celebration of workers, unions and people called to demonstrate energetically for workers' rights and universal peace.
So in Stroud today there's been a May Day rally in March, and I'm here with Hannah to talk a little bit about that and some of the other events that have been happening today. So Hannah, but you took part in the march, you're involved in Unite the Union.
Yeah, I'm a secretary for a branch for the Gloucestershire area health sector branch. So we cover health workers within and without the NHS and staff in care homes, pharmacists, GPs, secretaries, as well as allied health professionals like myself who work for the NHS. So it's a fairly broad church, fairly mixed bag.
And what do you think of May Day?
Well, I got involved really through my union, but to me I think of days like these as times to mark the sacrifice of workers who in general are making profits for their bosses, I guess, unless they work for a public setup like much of the central part of the NHS where I work still is, although of course this is now being eroded due to successive governments meddling and invoking various privateer clauses, I believe.
And can you tell me a little bit about what happened in Stroud today?
We met at the subscription rooms, banners held high each year. So this is usually organised by the local Labour Party, but it's not Labour Party focused as such. Everybody meets. We have a minute's silence to remember the people that have died in the workplace, and there's a wonderful socialist choir that sings, and we have a march around the town, and it's really it's a marker for the people that have passed away. It's a marker for people who are still struggling at work, and to remind people that, you know, it's the workers that make the world go round, I guess.
Last year, 144 people died in this country at work.
So there's on May Day, the 1st of May, there's a bank holiday, and that's about commemorating the Haymarket Martyrs and the labour movement's struggles generally. But a few days before, on what this year was Friday, April the 28th, there's another day which is called International Workers' Memorial Day, which is about, as you say, commemorating people who've died at work. So can you say a bit more about that and why that's so important?
There are still hundreds of fatalities in the UK alone every year in the workplace. And in fact, last year, between 140 and 150 workers actually died at work as a result of the work they do. And on top of that, 67 members of the public were fatally injured in accidents connected to work. So Workers' Memorial Day is as relevant now as it ever has been. It's quite interesting because deaths in the workplace did actually fall in the UK for several years, from the mid-2000s up until 2010, 2011, and then they started to rise again. Read into that what you will. They've started to level off again from last year, but it's I've heard people speaking for government and whatnot saying about this levelling of the number of deaths, which sounds good, but then better would be a fall, of course. But it's interesting to look at it because actually when you break it down, what you see is actually there isn't a levelling amongst people who are employed. There is actually a slight rise again in people who are employed by others for fatalities within the workplace. But because the number of fatalities amongst those that are self-employed has fallen, it looks like a levelling. So we do need to be quite cautious. And I'm particularly worried because, we rely on in the workplace so much on the health and safety executive, and they're really under the cosh at the moment.
There's loads of stuff always in the press about health and safety. It becomes a bit of a kind of stick to bash, lots of complaints about overzealous health and safety legislation or this sort of thing. But what real impacts does that end up having?
Well, I think it's enabled governments to kind of side more with the employers than with the workers. So, for example, the health safety executive had a social partnership with the Trades Union Congress, with the TUC, with joint panels, and that's actually been eroded quite a lot in the last couple of years. There's been a change. In fact, Hugh Robertson, who was the head of health and safety at the TUC himself, if I may quote him, said last year that the government has, in inverted commas, ended a 40-year social partnership with the TUC and the unions over health and safety. Ministers now decide who represents workers on the HSE board. Joint committees have now been wound down and there's less consultation with the HSE. And it's interesting, James, because this followed directly on from some behind closed door talks with employers' lobby groups. So that's really quite frightening. And I think the sort of more tabloid than broadsheet kind of stick that you mentioned for bashing health and safety, of course, has enabled this kind of thing to happen. Because now when people think of health and safety, they kind of bracket it along with, that phrase, political correctness and whatnot. And of course, health and safety, it's a comprehensive thing. It should be a comprehensive thing like health services. So, yes, sometimes things will seem petty, but you have to have them in place in law to protect everyone. And if you start chiselling away at that, the most vulnerable and those who are the weakest in the workplace are the ones who will be hurt the most. And we have to protect them.
We've had a great rally today for International Workers' Day, just to remember all the people who've died at work, and also to try to make sure we raise awareness of protection of those who are at work. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I think it's really raised people's spirits. We need to keep these sorts of issues with trade unions on the agenda. My name's Donna Cornell. I'm District Councillor for Dursley.
Historically in the UK, most people who were in a workplace would have been a member of a union, but now lots of people, particularly people who are younger, don't even really know what a union is for. The things people might think of is going on strike or battles over pay, or you're saying that there's also a range of other, even more basic things just about ensuring that you're safe at work.
Absolutely, yeah. Kind of ensuring your uniforms are paid for. Absolutely, all the absolute basic stuff. I don't think there's a workplace in the world that wouldn't benefit from its members being in a union. Lots of people go to work, they have grumbles about things that they know aren't right. If they're in a union, then they can talk to their rep or a union officer and say, I don't think this is right, and the union rep can turn around and say, well, actually, you're right, this isn't right, and we can do something about this for you and with you. But if you're not in a union, then you tend to just sit and grumble about it, and nothing gets done. And that same issue may be affecting tens or hundreds of you, and nothing gets done about it. So I think unions are really good in that respect, because they provide that solidarity and that backup and that emotional support, and you're not so alone when you have issues at work.
If people want to find out more about joining a union locally, or Unite in particular, is there an easy way they could contact you or someone?
The easiest way is online. Unite's regional office is in Gloucester at Pullman Court in Great Western Road, and anybody can look them up. They're really helpful. Unite generally, of course, as well as the health branches. We have branches covering every sector. We now have community branches, which are really interesting, because anybody who's not, in inverted commas, economically active can join these, and I think they're amazing. I mean, even the district branch, even homeless people can join. It's 50 pence a week, and they're pretty lenient. If people have difficulty, people with no fixed abode have difficulty paying subs, but these are the people that most need a union quite often when they're faced with, the daily combat of dealing with the public, dealing with the people that own shop doorways, the police, whatever. So I think those branches are absolutely amazing what they do, and of course it means that those who are at work then also can rely somewhat on the backing of people who aren't currently working, because sometimes when you're at work you don't have so much time to build up support for workplace issues, and they're great. And in Unite we also have the retired members branch, and they're fantastic as well, because if there's an issue, for example, speaking personally, where there's been issues in the NHS, in the workplace, sometimes the staff don't have the time to get so involved, or if there's a strike action, that, say, the retired members group and the community branches will be out promoting stuff for you. So they've been absolutely brilliant. We would say in Unite that we would rather people were a member of any union than no union, and lots of unions work very well together as well. Friday, actually, funnily enough, one part of the NHS recently outsourced, and our cleaners have actually been underpaid again another month by the company that the government gave their contract to, with no tendering exercise whatsoever. So I spoke to them. They're in a different union from me, but they were on to their union that same day, to get it sorted.
Okay, well, that's all the time we've got for the interview. Just ask one question, which we're going to ask hopefully all our guests on this new ReAct radio show, which is to ask people how they got involved in anything political to begin with. What's your kind of earliest memory of?
Well, I'd had a bit of sort of union stuff in my life. My mother was a nurse and a member of her union all her life. My father was a union member. He taught medicine. I suppose politically, subconsciously, I was always steeped in NHS ethos. My father was one of the medical students who heard Nye Bevan speaking and helped to actually go about promoting the new health service. So that was always there for us. My earliest memories of unions were when I worked in factories and we secretly paid subs to a rep, but we couldn't tell the boss because we'd have lost our jobs. Well, of course, things are a bit stronger now, and I hope that wouldn't happen, although I feel sure it does still happen in parts of the UK, in pockets. But for me, I'd actually been in one union or another for a number of years before I got really active, and that was literally the morning after I saw a letter that said that I was going to be leaving the NHS. And it wasn't until that moment that I realised how much working for the NHS meant to me, and I literally cried myself to sleep every night for weeks. But then I was kind of invigorated by the local anti-cuts group Stride Against the Cuts and getting more involved in the union, and suddenly I felt this sort of almost like this warm glow of help and people around me, and it just felt amazing to know that I wasn't on my own and I wasn't the only one who felt like this and was crying themselves to sleep every night. And of course, as a lot of people in Stroud will remember, we actually won that one, and thousands, literally thousands of Gloucestershire NHS workers and adult social care workers still now work for the public sector as a result of an action that was taken back in between 2010 and 2013. So from that moment on, I swear my allegiance, as it were, to the union cause.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for coming in and talking to us on this new ReAct radio show, being our first guest, Hannah. And hopefully you, the listener, will join us again for another show on ReSound Radio sometime soon. Bye.
Bye.